A word that echoes through the pages of history, soaked in blood and shadowed by pain. From ancient battlefields to modern city ruins, war has shaped empires, shattered nations and scarred humanity deeper than any wound the body can bear. Thousands of years ago, long before tanks and bombs, men fought with spears under the burning sun. In 1274 BCE, at the Battle of Kadesh, the Egyptian pharaoh raises the second clash with the Hittite Empire. In one of the earliest recorded battles, chariots thundered across the desert sands as warriors shouted the names of gods. But even then, victory brought little peace, land was won, lives were lost, and history quietly whispered. But this is only the beginning. Centuries passed. Kingdoms rose and fell, but the fire of war never died. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan unleashed an empire from the steppes of Mongolia that stretched farther than the eye could see. His horsemen rode like wind, burning cities, rewriting borders and leaving a trail of ash across Asia and Europe. To his enemies, he was a monster. To his people, a hero. That's the cruelty of war. It paints no man with a single brush. Then came the age of empires, the red coats of Britain, the flags of France, the steel of Spain, each chasing power across oceans, each leaving their footprints on foreign land. Colonies were carved not with diplomacy, but with swords. Indigenous peoples were silenced. Cultures crushed. Millions died not just on battlefields, but in silence, famine and chains. And then the world burned the First World War. They called it the war to end all wars, but the only thing it ended was innocent. Young men barely out of school marched with rifles on their shoulders, singing songs they didn't know would become their last. Trenches turned into graves, mud mixed with blood, rats fed on bodies, and gas invisible, silent, choking, filled the air like death itself had found a new weapon. When the smoke cleared in 1918, over 16 million lives had vanished. The world stood still, but it did not learn because just 2 decades later it happened again. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history. From the ashes of Versailles rose dictators with iron fists and twisted dreams. Hitler, Mussolini, Tojo cities were bombed into rubble. Millions of Jews, Roma, and others were herded into camps exterminated for who they were in the Pacific. Kamikaze planes screamed toward ships in Europe. Tanks rolled through snow and flame, and on August 6, 1945, the sun rose over Hiroshima and then disappeared in a flash of blinding white. In an instant, 80,000 lives vanished. The atom bomb, mankind's darkest invention, a weapon so powerful it could wipe out a city in seconds. And yet, after all that horror, war still found a way to survive. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, Gaza. Different names, same story, different flags, same pain today. Drones fly where once only eagles dreaded. War is no longer just fought by soldiers but by satellites, by code, by cold decisions made in quiet rooms, civilians, mothers, children, teachers. They die as often as those in uniform. And every explosion writes another story that will never be told. But why? Why do we still wage war knowing the cost? Some say it's power, others say pride, some claim it's for peace, but history has shown that true peace is never born from bullets. It is built slowly, painfully, by those who choose dialogue over dominance. And yet there are stories of courage in war, of the soldier who carried his wounded enemy across enemy lines, of the nurse who stayed behind in a burning hospital to save one more life, of the mother who shielded her child with her own body, of strangers who risked everything not to kill but to protect. Because even in the darkest moments of humanity, the light still fights to shine. War is not just history, it's not just politics, it's personal. It's a father who doesn't come home. It's a city turned to dust. It's a child who draws tanks instead of trees. As long as we glorify war, we are doomed to repeat it. As long as we forget its cost, the dead will speak louder than the living. So today, remember them, not just the heroes with medals, but the millions who never wanted to be part of the story. Remember the silence after the gunfire ends and ask yourself, what kind of world do we want to build? One where history repeats or one where peace finally has a chance? Music fades. Screen slowly goes black with the final line on screen, lest we forget.